right. I see we have a lot of participants coming in, so that's great, great to see and hear you all. So welcome to DataDreamin Session 1. Thank you, Gaurav, for the first session, for kicking it off about BigQuery. Super interesting and already a lot on the technical side. We've seen some great best practices. And I can only agree with Gaurav on thanking the organization for this. We're based in the Netherlands, and we've been jealously looking at all the activities, especially in the London Data Tribe. And we're very happy that with Data Tribe going really global with this event, and that we're also being able to be part of this. So let's start with a quick introduction. My name is Luuk Martens. I'm the practice manager data analytics at a company called NextView Consulting. And I have my colleague also with me, Jip.
Hi all.
And maybe Jip wants to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, my name is Koning. I'm a senior consultant at NextView Consultancy. And I'm in Luuk's team. So I'm also part of the Einstein Analytics Champion program. And I'm really happy to be here and to provide you with insights around data visualization and UX design.
Okay, so we're, as I said, NextView Consulting. So we're a European Salesforce implementation partner. And we're based in mainly the Netherlands and Germany. And clients come to us with all kinds of questions from a strategic or an operational point of view. And we try to solve that with a design-led approach and with, of course, Salesforce and Salesforce ecosystem products. And roughly most of our projects can be categorized in either focusing a lot on the customer centricity, so customer 360 or customer experience kind of projects, or more on the data and analytics side, bringing data to life, or more on the improving your business processes or supporting your business process better by digitizing. And you can think of all the Salesforce clouds, of course, mainly in that area. My business intelligence team is actually involved in all three. So even if there may be a more general Salesforce CRM implementation, we always take care of the data part, whether it's data migration or KPIs or reporting, dashboarding, or AI. Let's see, today we're going to talk about UX and UI, and I guess the first thing is that we're going to do is we're going to split between the two areas, where Jip later on will go more into the UI and the data visualization, and I'll start off with user experience. I think it's important that for all those types of projects, and despite we're focusing on an analytics project, a design-led approach is actually helpful across all those areas. And that's also why we as the data experts are actually also certified in Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and also in several design areas. So let's start off with UX and UI. So what we see mainly as the difference is where the UX design is really focused on not just the product itself, but also the whole context and the whole experience around that product. We see UI are mainly focusing on the interaction between the user and the product. So a big example, I guess, in this case is that even though you have made a great user interface, a great report or dashboard or whatever, if your internet connection is bad, or if it doesn't map in your on your mobile device, or it takes you quite a long time to interact with it, but you're looking for something that's really stressful at that time, your experience is totally different. And this is where we actually think that before diving into data visualization, it's important to actually start with the broader context and the broader way your company wants to work together with the final users of your data product, whether those are employees of your company or whether they are customers. So if we start pretty much in all of our assignments, all of our projects, we always start by with the discover phase. After that, we go to designing, and after that, we go into actually the developing or delivering, as we call it. But these are quick iterations, and the main point, what we're also forcing ourselves to do, is to start out with the people aspect of things. So we're really trying to get first a multidisciplinary team from clients, from subject matter experts, all together to really discover the problem that we're actually trying to solve. And getting those people together in an interactive workshop or multiple workshops is actually a great way to kick off your project, because on the social side, you get to know each other, you know, on the personal side, but also on the more content side, it gives you a lot of different perspectives and views. And that gives a lot of time to get a lot of requirements quite clear in the beginning, and also to actually manage the expectations of all those stakeholders in that process. And if I look at the process side of things, we tend to use the business process or business domain as a way to scope the project. So while from a maybe business intelligence point of view, you would ideally want to update all your management information across the whole company, we believe it's usually better to start off with one specific domain, for instance, a sales domain or a customer service domain, and actually build out from there and start out from there. And following that, once you have those people requirements, the context in which they will want to use the process and where they want to follow the process, that's when, of course, the tech part comes in. And we're trying to actually solve that not only by looking at Einstein Analytics, but also maybe in standard Salesforce or with Tableau or maybe Snowflake in there. So that's actually the whole mix that you're going to get into. So the first thing, if we go to the next slide, we have the, something that's called personas. So in the design process, if you know design process, this is you may know this. These are sort of fictional names and characters that you create, actually based on real user research. And there are a couple of reasons why you want to actually start out with building these personas, because once you're building a data product or a report or a dashboard, or if it's a machine learning algorithm, the developer really it's easier for the developers to emphasize with someone by giving them a face and a name and a story around it. And it's not always the case that your developers have direct connection with your end users, although we would always, of course, promote that. But having a set of personas within your development team about the end users will really help communicate and talk about the real requirements and actually help the product in the end become better. And there are a couple of things that from a more data perspective are really interesting about personas. So one side is to always take into account multiple levels of data literacy. You know, even though maybe a sales rep may be easy to stereotype, that's not really the goal of personas. The goal is really to then create a sales rep that is actually quite fluent in data talk and data speak, and maybe even in skill. And to also consider personas that don't have that data literacy. And the second aspect, of course, what is the role of a person? Because the role often also determines certain security levels, certain things that they have to do or are not allowed to do. And these tend to be very useful to also combine with that persona. And I think in the next slide, we have an example of that, how we actually use different roles for in this case, this was a more business intelligence center of excellence, where we really also graded them on the level of how skillful should they become. So this was actually a to-be part. And by doing that with personas and with those roles and with that skill set, you already from the start, even before you created any data visualizations, you identify where possible training of those end users, of those typical roles are necessary. Okay, so let's go to the next. So the second part of design is always to start out with a user journey or a customer journey or an employee journey or a buyer journey. Anyway, it's always about a clear, concrete example of a day in the life of those personas. And this is a way to not only look at it from a company business process side, but to really look at to step in the shoes of that end user and see what this person experiences during the day in which your product will be used. And this is where you quite quickly identify, for instance, moments where they switch device, or where there is time pressure or stress, or maybe difficult conditions if you're working in a factory on the floor, where all those aspects actually influence not just the user interface of your product, but actually the whole user experience. And again, from a data perspective, this is often a marketing template, but from a data analytics perspective, this is a great way to also identify which data objects are used and created and edited where and by who in the process, which is super helpful if you look at master data management or data quality. And the second thing is that it really identifies also where users are making choices or decisions or have questions that ideally you want to support with data, and maybe the users can't explain that they need data, but you as a data expert will maybe see the right moments where actually you can inspire them with use cases where they can use data to also in this user journey actually create a better experience of your product. And I guess the most important thing, if you look at from that side, you heard me saying it a couple of times, is making sure it's easy for the end user to use it, and trying to make sure that the insights are at the fingertips of that user and really embedded within his fully Salesforce experience or Einstein Analytics experience or wherever that user is. I think that's really core in the not just data visualization, data interaction, but also your whole user experience of your data product. So here we see an example where, of course, you have reports and dashboards within your user interface. We often see use cases around Opportunity 360 or Account 360 kind of dashboards that give a quick overview and are really embedded within your regular Salesforce process. But I think in the next one, we also have examples of your predictive analytics that you also, of course, want to embed as much as possible within that user interface, that they're already in there, and not having them to go to a different app or using Alt-Tab all the time. So I'm coming from here. I guess it's a good moment for I guess Jip to zoom more into the user UI design.
Yes, thank you, Luuk. So after the UX, we're now going to move on with the user interface or UI. I will try to provide you with a couple of theoretical examples, but also some nice tips and tricks that we see from our projects. The keywords from a UI perspective are mainly about visualizations, but also structure of the dashboard and also about the personalized experience. Because, for example, what is a landing page for a specific user in Einstein, and what should be their individual focus? Because KPIs can be interpreted quite vastly different within a company. For example, this is a sales KPI, and we always speak about the default level of aggregation. So everybody in the company should have access, of course, within their security domain to all specific records. Also, Einstein actionability by creating actions based upon individual records is a really key component in this way. But this setup, we speak about the default level of aggregation. An executive would like to see his sales based on a company level, or maybe a country or business line, and maybe even specified per product category. But in the middle management, they're more interested, of course, in sales or opportunity pipeline per account manager or per product or per business line. In the bottom of the pyramid, account managers should have a completely different focus because they're focusing mainly on individual opportunities or cases or in this sales order lines, and maybe also specified per customer. So as you can see, a KPI like sales, it can be interpreted vastly different within a company. That's why we're a big fan of personalized, role-based applications and dashboards. In the previous example, you saw a couple of roles specified. What we always do is creating applications based on a role. So as you can see in the right figure, we created a couple of applications like account manager application, sales manager application, and even up to executive. The advantage of this setup is that you have certain freedom to provide personalized graphs and data per role. You're also quite flexible to secure these applications with application sharing to public groups. You can apply different predicates, and the best of all is also that you can apply different default filtering and initial selections. Really useful if you need, for example, if you have companies in multiple countries and you would like to see multi-currency solutions, you can always specify that in a dashboard specific. So this is an example of a homepage in the Sales Analytics app standard in Einstein. We like this example because this is personalized. You will always see your 4 main KPIs in your homepage, and you have always the selection in the bottom to navigate to specific other dashboards. Those dashboards can be driven by specific use cases, like, for example, a customer dashboard, or otherwise grouped by specific information objects like sales or like opportunity. So we always aim for developing personalized homepages based on a specific role. When you would like to design the dashboard that is underlying to these homepages, it's great to use the dashboard structures provided by the Einstein Analytics design guide. The F and the Z dashboard frameworks are quite useful to group your visualizations in the dashboard. I created a couple of examples to see the difference, for example, between an account manager and a sales manager. In this way, this dashboard is based on design style guide application. I can highly recommend to install that to see if you can use specific metrics and graphs for that dashboard application. But in this way, this is the account manager homepage, for example. You can apply default filtering, as you can see in the top right corner. You can filter by sales rep name. You can provide your individual KPIs in the top left corner. You can personalize things like unit of measure settings, currency, and you can even apply new filters in this dashboard. When you look at the sales manager, the most part of the dashboard can be the same. So if with the proper deployment tools and proper versioning and creating queries, you can reuse a lot of those charts. In the middle, you will see a new chart, which is really focusing on comparing the sales reps within the zone of the sales manager. So this is a small example about how you can personalize these specific dashboard frameworks. So that was the first part about the data structure. Now we would like to continue with choosing the right graphs, and also do not make the mistakes that you choose the wrong ones. So we have a couple of nice examples, also a quick exercise. But first I would like to start with what could possibly go wrong. We see a lot of these charts, and personally I'm not a big fan of those charts because it uses too much space for the limited amount of information that is provided. We also see a lot of pie charts which are grouped by too many segments, which makes it barely readable. And this is also a nice example from a couple of years ago, where you can see that the y-axis it does not start at 0, so you will get a complete different insight than the actual data looks like. So it's quite important to choose the right graph. Why is it so important? Yeah, visualization comes down to efficiently and quickly understand large amounts of data. Image speaks louder than text, and it's also, for example, really useful to visualize complex formulas to understand data better. But how to choose the right graph? Most people, they will look to beautiful graphs, but most of the times those graphs are not the most effective ones. We believe in that simple charts are usually the most effective. Watch out for too many color palettes. Watch out for a mess designed for every device and use color only for the data. We have some nice examples in the coming slides. This is a standard table. Without any visualization, it's really hard to understand, for example, what the lowest score is or in which region it does have a seasonal pattern. So if you add a graph, you will basically see immediately what those answers are. For example, you see the lowest point in the West in March. So visualization is absolutely key in this setup. We see a lot of pie charts. It is, I think, one of the most popular graphs. It looks quite attractive, but is it useful? What about this example? Can you compare Apple with Samsung? And what is the market share of ZTE? It's really hard to see the actual figures of this pie chart. So what our advice would be is that you use pie charts only for infographics, add as few segments as possible and sort them ascending. If you would like to include labels, that is also useful. But there is a better way. Because when you look at the same questions as we had before, it is now with a bar chart really clear what Apple does in comparisons to Samsung. You can also easily check the market share of ZTE. So we prefer always a bar chart above the pie charts. Another example about the GOGs. As I mentioned before, I don't like GOGs because they will use a lot of space in your dashboard and they will only provide a limited amount of information. I think it's better to use a metric, or even better if you combine it with a target, use a bullet chart, which is available in Einstein. Try to avoid stack bars. In this situation, it is really hard to compare individual countries, for example, and it's really hard to see individual figures. So try to group them in the second way, because in that case you are able to see the data and the trend of the data. Timelines are quite good, but it's also good to add, for example, a weekly difference or just a general difference. It provides you with some additional information which can be really useful for specific trends. This is also a graph that we see, unfortunately, too much. This is just, in my opinion, a mess. Try to avoid the mess, try to limit the color settings and make it more relaxing. For example, this is a quite a nice example of easy to understand and beautiful graphs. The last part about color use is also key. As mentioned before, use colors only for the data that is crucial. Try to avoid other colors that are not related to data pixels. So the golden rule in here is reduce the non-data pixels. But as you can imagine, some companies would like to see their own branding back in the dashboards. What is then the practical advice? For example, I have an example of a customer service agent dashboard for a company that has a really bright color in the the logo, company brand. So if you make it really clear and focus on what the most important is, it's quite okay to use these bright color settings. Use them as the main line and try to reduce the non-data pixels. So to summarize, it is absolutely key to choose the right graph. Don't necessarily choose always the most beautiful one, but use the simple charts that are the most effective ones. Try to design for every device and avoid too bright color settings. And last but not least, make it action oriented, because that's really also a key strength of Einstein Analytics. So our key takeaways for this session: a great UX approach will drive absolute your adoption of both the dashboard, but also your general innovation program. Data analytics is a people business. Start always there. Data should, and also the graphs should be about business value and enable the end users in their decision making. It should be an experience, and the last but not least, reduce the non-data pixels. I can highly recommend the following documents or books. For example, the books from Stephen Few and Scott Berinacho are full of psychology about designing the right graphs. Stephen Crook's book is about customer journeys, and of course the Einstein Analytics design guide is also really useful by designing beautiful dashboards. So if you're interested in our way of working, looking for Einstein experts, please let us know directly or via our website. If you have any questions, I would like to hear them, and otherwise you can ask them in the Slack channel. Thanks for now.
Thanks, Jip. And I see we have a couple of questions actually. So let's go through them. Let's see. So there's somebody, Tim, asking on your thoughts about actionability. And in the standard designs, the actionability is actually hidden in the bottom. Would you, what are your thoughts about putting actually the actions on top and the context below?
We always start by putting the most important KPIs in the left corner. So once an end user is notice something, there's something happening, try to filter the dashboard and see which individual records are involved in that specific situation. So I am fully agreeing by putting the KPIs in the top and the action list in the bottom. It's also possible to hide them in another tab, for example, but starting with the most important KPIs in the top aggregated is always, I think, the good way to go.
All right, cool. Let's see about color usage. How do you consider color usage for low vision or color impaired users?
There are some really nice examples online at Google just for a color palette. You will directly see great color palettes that are also really useful for impaired users. So just Google it, try it with the end users as well. That's also key in designing those dashboards. Try to validate it with your end user and see if the colors are working properly.
Okay. And I guess Tim, if you can't find it or need to know more information, feel free to connect with Jip or me, and we'll help you out getting to those colors. We're almost at the end of our session, and I guess there's still a question about A/B testing, but maybe to answer more in general. So we currently don't use any research or monitoring tools within the Einstein product, of course, itself on A/B testing. But we are, of course, there's a lot of work being done on the UI research and also data visualization research, and we actually keep track of what's happening in that space and what's being researched. So actually what we're doing is we're taking a lot of those experts, like the books of Stephen Few and the other books that Jip mentioned, and we're applying that in our own area. So I guess with that, thanks everybody for joining, and I'm looking forward to seeing you back in the third presentation in about 10 minutes.
Thank you.